let's talk about purpose. I want to talk about purpose for a reason, because we're coming into a new year. And how many people want to get the journey going forward a little more in the new year? There has to be a purpose. A lot of people, they go to a job, their purpose is retirement, and they retire and they die. Why? Because it's not a good purpose. This one guy, he retired, called Dave Ramsey. He retired at 37. He's fully funded. So my pension's fully funded. My bank account's fully funded. Everything's off. We're out of debt. We got all this cash. Worked my tail off for 30, until I was 37 and retired. He goes, I have no purpose. And he says, I was doing all that to retire, but I have no purpose. And what good is it? By the way, at 37, you're not going to have a lot of friends your age who are retired, so you're going to be, there's no one to spend time with, right? And that's going to be a problem, if you hit the lottery, everyone else is still working, These are the kind of things that purpose really is important. I want to show you that you have to understand this. Everything that God does has a purpose. Everything he's done with us, for us, to us, through us, in the kingdom, everything is not without purpose. There is nothing he has done. Even when we're going to look at, since it's Christmas, we're going to look at Luke chapter 2, if you'll turn there. And, Chris Valentin, said this one time. He's probably said it more than one time. He said this: without vision, there's no pain in the process. There's no purpose in the pain. So in other words, if without knowing where you're going, then it's hard to endure the things you go through in getting there because there's no reason to go through them. Now, it doesn't mean all pain is purposed by God, but there will be pain in the process. Because not everyone is equally in the process with you, so some people are going to cause you pain. But God allows that pain with a purpose to refine our character. It says this in Romans chapter 5, verse 2, that through the trials and tribulations, God allows those so that we refine our character, so our character would have hope, and that hope doesn't disappoint. It doesn't mean that everything you go through is necessarily like ordained by God in the sense of, I'm going to cause your brother to lie to you, and he's not causing sin. He neither tempts nor can he be tempted. So he's not doing that. That's not what we're talking about. Because sometimes people think, well, then he gave you sickness. No, but he does allow sickness to come in a way, right? There is sickness. He could end it right now. He could end all sickness. Is that agreed? Like he could end it today. One word, and it's over. That's all he's got to do is just say, sickness, be gone. Like, that's all he's got to do. Out of the earth, gone. It's over. He could do that. He's powerful, okay? He's Lord of everything. He can do that. He doesn't do that. Why? Because without the process, without the pain in the process, your character won't be refined into his image. You'll just have, it's like, you look at spoiled kids who are never disciplined, and they're fun to be around. If you don't discipline your kids because they're annoying. They're most likely annoying because they're undisciplined, but you don't discipline them because they're annoying. You discipline them because you want to refine them properly so they're productive in their future, right? There's purpose in discipline. Say that. There's purpose in discipline. God disciplines us. He says he disciplines the sons that he loves. If he doesn't do anything to people, just realize they might not be his. It's true. The worst thing you can want is God never to rebuke you, never convict you, never to do that, because that's just not good. You have to rejoice in the rebuking because it's actually a sign of his love. Now, if you don't understand that, you think, well, some people have this mentality of God. He loves me. He doesn't care what we do. I mean, he cared so much to send his son, but he doesn't care what you do. That doesn't make sense. I love when people say, I don't conform to a religion. But I'm very spiritual. Well, that's called demonic, and that's a different story, but I'm very spiritual. No, you're just very confused. And There's a purpose for everything that we go through. But here's Mary, betrothed. We don't even know if she loved Joseph. She didn't have a whole lot of say in it. Okay? People go, well, we don't ask for permission today. It's true. People go, because women aren't property. Well, they were property during this time. You have to understand that. Okay? They were property. Women were property. Under Judaism, the last 200-300 years before Jesus came, they were property. It's just the way Judaism wrote 100 laws against women. That's why only a woman is brought who's caught in adultery. People think, well, they didn't want to bring the man. The man couldn't commit adultery under Judaism. Judaism wasn't biblical. That's why Paul left Judaism. If it was biblical, Paul would have left it. Okay. And Paul didn't leave the scriptures. He didn't leave the testimonies of God. He didn't leave the writing of Moses. Matter of fact, he said all that stuff was for our doctrine and all that. So he didn't leave any of that. All right. So let's just read from verse 1. And it came to pass in those days that the decree went out to Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. And since his first, now when it says all the world, it's all of their world. They don't know what they don't know about other places in the earth. In other words, wherever Caesar had reign, that was his world. He didn't care about the world that he didn't know about, but he did like the land next to his. The Roman Empire believed in increase. That looks nice over there. Let's go, and they go take the land. I mean, but it's hard to maintain land too. But this census first took place while Quirinius was governor in Syria, and all went out to register, everyone to his own city. Joseph went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. And she brought, I love, this looks so amazing. Now, what you have to understand is God's purpose in all this. The Christ must be born in Bethlehem. So what does God do to make this guy? He stirs the heart of Caesar to call for a census, which causes Joseph to go to Bethlehem. See, you don't understand that what you might think is happening now has a greater purpose than you see. I'm sure Joseph is like, my wife's almost due, right? This is so inconvenient. He doesn't know. He's not trying to fulfill Scripture. He just has to, it's by law. He has to go. So amazing. So amazing, God's perfect ways that we sometimes don't see. Because, we'd interfere with it. We absolutely would. We'd screw. Look, if you knew all the plans, you'd screw it up. Why? Because you'd work the plans instead of being led by the presence. When we live by principle, not presence, we get distant. As people sometimes give, this is why I don't want you to give without worship. Because when you give without worship, you're living by principle, not present, not worship. And that's not how God wants you to give. He doesn't want you to give by principle. He wants you to give as part of worship. Because that's the greater thing. The principle's right. People sometimes, they go, I give because I want to receive. That's a correct principle. But I give because I worship. Okay. All right. Joseph went up, and because it's okay, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was that while they were there, his days completed for her delivery, and she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. I think about this, like, that's where David would have been. It's interesting that David was a shepherd and Jesus first announced it to the group of shepherds. Look, this is David's covenant that he's fulfilling here. David says, I'm going to build you a house. He says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to build you a house. And what the house is prosperity, not a building. It's prosperity. And he goes, forever you'll have a son on the throne. And Jesus becomes that son who's forever on the throne. And God, and there's a whole correlation throughout Scripture of shepherds and all this. Like there's a great study, but God has the angels come and announce it to shepherds. Why? Because it was David's, it was in the field as a shepherd that David prevailed over the house of Joseph and got the promise of the birthright. It's in 1 Chronicles chapter 5. Reuben was the firstborn, but then it was given to Joseph, but the house of Judah prevailed over the house of Joseph, that the royal scepter went. In other words, it was in David, when he was just a little shepherd boy, that he was worshiping God, that he prevailed over the house of Joseph, that what should have been Joseph's became David's. And so he appears to the shepherds. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. I would have been. Some people today would try to pull out their iPhones. Can you get a little closer together? I want to. Glad it takes pictures at night now. We can take pictures. And glad you caught them. And you are? I got to put it in my blog this week. Facial recognition. Oh, that's Gabriel. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord. What is the glory? It's the in this case, it's the brightness. It's what happened to Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, and he just got radiant. It says this when he's on the throne. John says this in book of Revelation, chapter 1, that when he looked at the one who was speaking to him, his face shone with brightness. Okay, so the brightness of God. They're on the hill with all the sheep, and here comes, it's nighttime, and the glory of the Lord comes into place. And you got to think about this stuff. It's not just for the Bible times, it's for you. God would like to take some of us up the mountain of transfiguration. Oh, no, Lou. No. They were greatly afraid. I would have been. Then the angel said to them, do not be afraid. I love that one. Well, could you have come in a little bit more, slowly? Could you send us a card first saying, we're about to appear to you. Don't be afraid when we show up. No warning. Boom, Do not be afraid, and behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. So he's giving them the purpose. You notice how he's giving them the purpose before he told them what it was? God always has a purpose. You're going to find this throughout his promises. Say this. His promises to me always have a purpose. You got to, if you don't know the purpose, it's hard to pursue the promise. Because the promise just seems like a fantasy, a dream. Without the purpose, you won't go through the process. Okay? And the reward for going through the process in the promise is what you get the other side. All right. How many people want, the Bible even tells us this in Hebrews chapter 12 about chastisement, that when we're chastisement, it's profitable. It talks about the profitability of allowing God to deal with us in our stupidity. Anyone been stupid in the last year? Just once? Oh, I know. No. How many people need to raise your hand because you're lying about everything else I've asked? Ruh-roh. Ruh-roh, Shaggy. Yeah, this is when we don't understand, if we don't have a vision, the pain of the process it discourages us. It derails us. It gets to the point of like, you ever say this, I don't know why I'm doing this. Right? It's like going outside and just digging a hole. Why are you digging a hole? I don't know. I nothing else to do. You dig a hole because you want to put something in the hole. A tree, a plant, a body, whatever. This is, now look at, digging holes is very difficult. And that's why guys get caught, because they just don't dig that thing deep enough and there's a lump over it. You got to dig deeper. Just having fun with you, just trying to keep it light. Trying to give you away some family secrets. Dig the hole deep enough. Yeah, by the way, if you're going to plant plants, dig the hole deep enough. This, why don't we dig the hole deep enough? It's a lot of work. I've dug in Connecticut, Clay. I did sprinkler systems for about 3 weeks before me and Kathy moved out. And oh God, that was tough. That was tough digging, especially in, it never really feels like it's, clay feels like it's in the permafrost forever. You go to digging that, Yeah. That's what they make machinery for. That's what I'm saying. I don't know why we're still digging. There's machines for that stuff. I never seen anyone get blisters for moving the machinery. But how many of you have ever you wanted something and you were willing to work overtime? You're willing to do something just because you need it. You need it. It had purpose. It's hard to get people to work overtime when they have no dreams. Kathy would do this with me, and I love her. But whenever they called for overtime, she wouldn't ask me. She'd go, he'll be in. We just had an agreement. Look, we wanted stuff for our kids. We wanted a house. It was like this. Oh, he'll be in. Well, don't you have to ask him? Oh, no. He'll be in. What time you need him? Oh, he'll be there. Don't worry. I worked all the holidays. Now, I didn't actually work the holidays sometimes, but I worked 5 days a week, which was a holiday. I worked all the holidays. I worked. I worked. How many people have ever worked without a purpose and found it really not as fun? When I was in the Navy once, I took a second job and it was doing roofing with a friend, and he needed help on his roof. I helped him with his, and I was done after that because there wasn't enough purpose for that pain. And I was in really good shape. But let me tell you something. 95 degrees outside on a roof, bending down constantly with your knees? No. I didn't find a good enough purpose for that pain. I was like, I have a job. Like, I don't need to do this. I had no purpose. I was young. I had enough money. I did not need that. It was like, it doesn't matter how old you are. You get home, you're like, oh my God, what did you do with your legs? It's like hurting. It's like, you're like, been out. Oh, it's not good. Those guys who do it, they are just amazing. But I will pay for someone to do the roof every time. I am not the guy who's like, I'm going to save some money. No, I'm going to save my life and pay someone else for this. That's what I'm going to save. I'm going to save my knees, my life, everything. For there is born to you. Now he's going to tell them the reason, what the good news is. Here's the purpose. It's going to be good news. For there's been born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. Find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in a manger. And suddenly there was an angel with the angel, a multitude of heavenly hosts praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill towards men. God always, if you go back and read your prophetic words, you'll say, when God called me, the first time that a prophet called me out as being a prophet in front of everybody, like literally called it out, there was purposes behind it. In other words, God's called you to be a prophet, and it was this. You're not just going to, distribute money, but God's going to have you distribute anointings. It took me, that was 1996. It took me until 2016, 17 before I entered that purpose. You have to get some anointings before you can distribute anointings. That helps. It wasn't about just doing it in faith. Here, look, I needed the everything I went through to become a prophet. And you go, well, wait a minute, what do you mean to become? There's things God has you go through. It's not always easy. There was a bunch of people who thought they were, I'm gonna be in the ministry, and they make it about 3 months, and then you don't see them anymore. You're like, where'd they go? Why? Because the vision wasn't real enough for them to keep pursuing it. You have to have some vision to become a doctor. It's not a 3-year school. It's 4 years and 4 years and 3 years, and then was it? Well, what's before resident? Is it residence first, and then what's the other one after that? Huh? Oh, attendee. That's it. That's the one. I forget Grey's Anatomy. I forgot what the sequence was. It's and it's a lot of hours. You stay awake a lot, and they make you stay awake. They make you work the 36-hour shifts and all that. Why? Because you might be in the middle of something near the end of your shift, and you can't leave. It's not like right in the middle of the heart surgery. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm done. And just put them on ice. I'll be back tomorrow at 8. The reward of it. I don't have a problem with doctors making a lot of money. People are like, doctors make too much money. Well, you go be a doctor. You want a guy who doesn't make a lot, yeah, I'll do this for $5. Now, I don't want a heart surgeon who goes, I'll do this for $5. I don't want that. I want someone who values his work, you know what I mean? I'm sure I could do it. I watched a YouTube video yesterday on it. So we cut right here. Is that the heart? Ew, blood. How do you know it? Like it takes to do anything great. Like you look at Elon Musk. His sister said he read 2 books a day. And they weren't novels. They were technical books. He would read 2 books a day. He was a genius. He's annoying. But he's probably done okay. I'm sure Donald Trump's father had him work a lot in the family business. It's paid off. He still, by the way, gets up at 4:30, goes to bed at midnight. They said in the first time in the White House that he was at every meeting. Like some of the presidents delegate that. He went from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, listening to people. He was so involved in everything. He didn't delegate. He was responsible. He took that responsibility seriously for everything. Not everyone's like that. See, some people's purpose about being government is power, not serving. Sometimes people in ministry, people just want to be in leadership to have authority, not to serve. When you change the purpose, you're going to corrupt the spirit. Turn to Romans chapter 8. Listen to this verse 28. And you should underline this in your Bibles. Write it down. Remember it. Don't ever change it. This will give you hope in any pain you're going through. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and those who are the called according to his purpose. Now, it doesn't mean that those who have purpose, in other words, he has called you with a purpose, and therefore, he has promised this. You might not understand it, but somehow this is going to work out okay. You don't understand it now. It doesn't mean everything you went through was authorized or, let's say, the will of God. It's not what it means. Everything that happens in the earth is not the will of God, but he has made this promise to us. Look, it's going to work out because you're his. And he's going to make even that work out for you. And you're going, well, I don't know how. Have you ever said, I don't know how this is going to work out? Ever said that? How many ever the enemy tried to come and steal your hope going through the process? Look, it doesn't mean, look, I've been shot at, people rip me off. That doesn't mean those were ordained by God. It doesn't mean God was like, yeah, I did this. No, he did allow it. I'm aware of that. You go, well, you allowed it. Well, maybe, but I mean, prevent anything. He's big enough to make sure that I never stub a toe. Angels could lift up that chair before you stub your toe, right? But push you outside, steer you out of the way, Sometimes they intervene. You don't know how much they intervene from our stupidity. You ever been driving a road and the car hits the car behind you? Just missed you somehow? And you're like, I don't know how that car missed us. Sometimes he's so merciful, right? But he's still merciful in this. He's like this, look, there are things that are going to happen that you're not going to like. I know that because there's sin in the world. We know that going in, right? There's sin in the world. Wouldn't it be great? I know we want a utopia where no one's going to do wrong. I know we think the church should have no one doing, we should. That would be we should always strive for the perfection of that. The problem is that everyone's in process, and that process causes pain to everybody else, It's like your baby wakes up and they're sick. It would be ideal if that didn't happen. But when the baby's sick, how many know the whole house feels it? Especially those who stay up with them, right? It's not that God ordained the sickness, but, I always stayed up with the kids. My thing was always to feed the kids between 2 and 3 in the morning so Kathy could sleep. But I took that time always to pray over the kids. I didn't want to be up between 2 and 3. I'd rather be sleeping. I like sleep. I value it more than staying awake forever. On this side, I'll be okay there. I remember when I'm driving to work in my Cadillac. I bought this 88 Cadillac in 92, had 36,000 miles in it. It was a nice Cadillac back then, I'm driving to work. This has got to be it's got 256,000 miles on it now. That's how much I drove it. So I drove it 220,000 miles. And I'm driving to work, and I had the cruise on, and I hit some water. And while the cruise was on, so the wheel spun a little bit, and I could tell, I heard the transmission. I went, oh, no. And I know this, if you stop, wherever you stop is where you stop. Like if you put in park, you're not getting it out of park again. The transmission, I could hear it slip, and I went, uh-oh. And I made this nice slow turn, started heading back to home, called them up, told them I wouldn't be in, car broke down, da-da-da. Got home, by the way, that car never moved again. That was it. They had to come and tow it. It was done. I remember saying to the Lord, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about this? And this is what the Lord said to me. If I didn't kill it, I'd never be able to get you a new one. Sometimes God's killing something in our lives because he's got something new, but we won't leave the old season for the new. Because sometimes it's easier to stick with what we're familiar in the pain than go to the promised land of destiny. When we were in the wilderness, God fed us with manna, kept us temperature control. We didn't have to plant anything in the wilderness. We just ate manna. He brought us some quail. They mumbled, we got some. Okay, great. Now we're going into the promised land. You know what stopped once they got in the promised land? The manna. Sometimes our destiny looks like a little bit more like work than the wilderness did, because in the wilderness, he was preparing us to trust him, and now we have to trust him with the responsibility too. Most of the people didn't have to do anything in the wilderness. The Levites did. The Levites were working the whole time. The priests were working the whole time, but most of the other people weren't really. Well, their big work was go out in the morning, get the manna. Eat the manna, get up the next morning, get some more manna. They didn't have to make clothes. Their sandals grew. Their clothes didn't wear out for 40 years. The kids grew, the sandals just grew with them. I would like to find that shoe company today. Guess what they had to do when they got into the promised land? They had to make shoes. And they didn't want to go. And so they got to stay another 40 years and never go. If God, and I said, okay, Lord, I just said, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? And he said, this is what I want you to do. And he said, I bought Kathy a used van because I wasn't sure she would like driving a van. And so I want you to get her that. And he said, and then I'm going to get you a brand new vehicle. And what he did was, after she liked the van, kept it for like 2 years, it was a piece of trash van. It was bad. Like it was, I only spent like $2,500. I said, why? The reason was my spiritual father had bought his wife a full conversion van. She drove it once and never drove it again. She hated it. She's like, I'm not driving. And he spent like $34,000, drove it off the lot, went back. They said, we'll give you $24,000 for it. So he kept it. You know, he gave it to one of his assistants to drive. I hated it. He had me drive that van once or twice. I hated it. I was like, that is the worst thing to drive in the world, is that thing. You can't see anything in it. You can't see anything in it. This was before they had backup camera. You couldn't see anything in that thing. I hated driving that. He goes, I had a Cadillac. And he go, take that. I go, I don't want to take that. I'll take my Cadillac. Oh, no, I need you to take that. You got to pick people up at the airport. My Cadillac can fit the people in there. Trust me, this is built for Italians. We can fit 3 or 4 bodies in there. It's no problem, not a problem. He'd make me drive that thing. I couldn't wait to get back and get to my car. I was like, now I know why your wife gave that up. So 2 years later, I said, okay, Lord, now what? He says, go buy the van for your wife. So we went to Nimnik Chevrolet. I'll tell you where we went. And Nanny, who was living with us, goes, hey, you know, my best friend 30 years ago, her husband worked there. I wonder if he's still there. And she called him. He is now the president of sales. And she goes, you know, they're coming out to buy a van. You can see what they can do for him. So we went out there on a Sunday. So he wasn't there. We went out there Sunday, and I'm looking at the van. And the Lord said, I go, well, boy, we'd love to have that video package. And by the way, video packages weren't standard. They're an aftermarket thing. They'd have someone come in and do. And, I'm going, okay. And I'm going, how much can this is what I said, how much can I afford? Right? Does that seem responsible, right? How much can I afford? What do I want to spend a month? And the Lord says this to me. Well, he says, if you figure out how to pay for it, you'll pay for it. If you trust me, I'll pay for it. But if you figure it out, you're not going to get what I want for you, and you're going to struggle over these payments the whole time. I'm not telling you to do this every time. I'm just telling you what he spoke to me. So I'm telling Kathy, captain's chairs, yeah. Video package, yeah. Leather, I got the extra warranty. I got everything on the thing. Load her up. It came to something like $32,000, and then financing, all that would have been total outshell of that with all the financing would have been like $47,000. I called him the next day. He asked me which car, who I was dealing with there. He calls me back an hour later. He goes, okay, final price is $29,000, plus tax. I think it came to like 31 or whatever it was. $29,000. That one? He goes, yeah. I have another friend who's up in he's the bookkeeper or the finance guy up in GM dealership, and he looks up the car. And I could hear him. You know, all those guys are good with the calculator. You know, they don't even have to look at the thing. You know, they just look like there's something out of like a robot. You know, and you could hear it going. And it has that. Yeah. I go, what's the matter? He goes, he gave it to you for the exact price they paid for it. Didn't mark it up a penny for you. That's exactly what they got it for. So he didn't mark it up at all. I said, wow. And then he goes, and then I go call him. I go, we'll pick it up tomorrow night. He goes, okay, pick it up. Wednesday morning, I get a call from the finance guy. I'm like, oh man, here comes the hook, like here it comes. I go, hi Scott, it's Lewis. He goes, hey, look, this morning they came out with 0% financing. I've redone all your paperwork, so you don't have to pay any financing. Come back and you have to re-sign the paperwork for me. Look, I had to go through the pain of my car dying. I had to go through the pain, that worry of that, right? I need another car. I had to go through a really crappy van for 2 years. Didn't like that van. It was a Chrysler van, but it was, I'm not a Chrysler fan at all. If you have a Chrysler, I'm sorry for you. I'm not a fan. Because they still haven't figured out electrical in Chryslers. It's my big problem with Chryslers. Because that's what was wrong with this van, dude. And we looked in the engine compartment. There's all these jumpers because they had to bypass all the. It was crazy. I was thinking about buying a Chrysler. I'm driving with a friend. I go, hey, you guys had this Chrysler Town and Country for 4 years. I said, have any problems with it? He goes, no, man, it's been a great van. And all of a sudden, his whole dashboard starts lighting up and blinking. I go, what the heck's that? And he goes, oh, yeah, they've had this electrical thing going on. They keep replacing the battery. I said, I just asked you if you had anything going on with you. You said no. So that's why I just stayed away from them. I mean, if we can't figure out, AC, DC power by now, we're in trouble. This is something we've known about for 100 years. So God paid that van. I remember even when I quit my job, I had like 2 payments left. And I remember paying that last payment. I remember just saying to the Lord, that was like the least stress I've ever had on a car payment. For 5 years, $558 a month, and the Lord made every payment. Now, I had to sign the check, but he made every payment. And my point is that, boy, if I hadn't gone through the process of learning to hear his voice, making mistakes, the process of, that card, and it might seem silly. Sometimes you might, I remember when Bill Johnson lost his father. They had made this statement, they're going to be a cancer-free zone in Redding. And the next thing you know, Bill's secretary and his father died of cancer. And Bill had prayed for his father, for months, and his father passed away. And by the way, there's just sometimes we're going home. It doesn't mean the sickness was of God, I don't understand it all. I don't ask questions he's not answering. But I remember Rick Joyner called him up and said, you've been pushing this 2,000-pound boulder uphill. He said, but now the 500-pound boulder is going to move a lot easier. And they started seeing mass people with cancer healed. That's when they started seeing the breakthrough. See, we don't understand the pain we go through. By the way, it's not fun, and it doesn't mean we invite it. It doesn't mean it's the will of God. Bill just lost his wife. It doesn't mean it was the will of God. He just doesn't ask that question, like, God, why? He doesn't ask that question. He said that's not a question God's going to answer. There's some things you just trust God with. We like to make up things like, God wanted them in heaven. And, we like to make up things like that to make ourselves feel better, but that doesn't actually build our trust anymore, right? We're just going to have to trust him in the pain. But he actually has a purpose for the pain you're going through. You don't understand it. By the way, even on the other side, you don't understand it sometimes. You just see the fruits of it that, maybe what you went through helps you to comfort other people who have gone through stuff. Maybe you didn't get the breakthrough, but now, like Eric, is deaf, like 80% deaf in both ears, but he's seen about a couple hundred people healed of deafness, but he hasn't been healed. But every time if someone gets healed, when he prays for him, he goes, I'm one closer, Dad. I don't know when it's going to tip it, but I'm one closer to being healed. You're always striving for the perfection. Say that. I'm always going for the perfection. But in that process of going for the perfection, there's struggle, there's pain, there's disappointment. That thing. And if you don't start learning, if you go back and listen to your prophetic words and listen to what God has spoken to you, there's always a purpose that he gives. When Randy gave me that word in 1996, and I didn't know who Randy was, and Randy didn't know who I was, and he said, he had this long word that, God's called you to be a prophet, you're going to rub elbows with other prophets, he says God's going to have you distribute not just money, but distribute anointings. I didn't understand that, and then I went through this process. And by the way, part of that word was they're not going to accept you and you're going to be put down into a lower realm in business for a season because they won't accept your gift and da-da-da. By the way, I went through all that. Sometimes you go through stuff like, oh Lord, all I was doing was praying for people and they got mad at me. I know people have come to our church and they're like, I was at my church, I was praying for someone with cancer and they said, we don't believe that here. You can't do that here. And they labeled me as someone who believes in miracles. And, I label them as someone who doesn't. Someone who has like if you don't believe that God speaks today, then you're actually doing what the pagans did. They had gods who couldn't speak. You're actually worshiping in a pagan way if you don't think God speaks to you, because Paul says, you know how you're carried away with dumb, mute, unspeakable idols. God is not a dumb, mute, unspeakable idol. He's a living God who talks to us and can hear us, and we can talk back and we can hear him. My sheep hear my voice. But you go and say that in some Baptist, look, when me and Kathy got filled with the Holy Ghost with the speaking in tongues, her father was like, the devil can use that. And I said, really, Dad? I just looked at him, I said, really? Like, I wasn't a theologian. I was like, really? That makes no sense. I looked at him, I said, it doesn't even make sense. But you know what I did? I didn't try to convince him. I sent his mother to get prayed for. She got healed. She got filled with the Spirit, came back and prayed for him. He got filled with the Spirit. I mean, it's like there's ways around. There's always a way to your, I knew the way to the Papa's heart was through his wife. Benny Hinn was against the joy of the Lord, would speak against it. So God smacked his wife with it right in front of him in the middle of his meeting. He repented. Some people are going through chastisement now publicly and they're being corrected, but there's a purpose in that. Our purpose should always be restoration. God's purpose is refinement. Look, God's not angry because you sin, but he will chastise you because he loves you and he wants to perfect you. He's not angry. If he was angry, you know it, you'd be done. Like, that's it. When he was angry at two men for offering up profane flame, he didn't rebuke them. He burned them. That's the anger of the Lord. That's the wrath of the Lord. You don't want that. We're not appointed to wrath, but we are appointed to sometimes going through stuff that aren't always wonderful. Look, the devil is nothing but a tool in the hand of God. You understand that? There's no battle. There's not a battle between Jesus and Satan. There's no battle. This whole theology that Jesus is up there and we're in a battle with, no, we might be in a battle. He's not. We might think we're in a battle, except we're more than conquerors because Jesus conquered. This is what overcomes the world, even our faith. We're overcomers because Jesus won. There's no battle, folks. Jesus, look, if Jesus wants to, today, all sickness, disease, all conflict, everything, everyone who offends in the kingdom, gone, by, out. That's what it says about the wheat and the tares. They'll come and all the tares are taken out first before the wheat. You might want to think about who goes first. The wheat are taken and they're burned, and then you shine forth like the glory of. Look, if he wants to, when he wants to, that's coming someday. Don't know when, not prophesying it, coming. Don't know when. I just know my last days are upon me. They could be the next 25, 30 years, but they're my last days. I don't get another set of days. This is it. You get one life, the body will die. Me, I can't. Randy was in line, whistling Majesty, and this guy turned around and said, go to hell. He recognized a song of the demon manifest and said, go to hell. And Randy said, I can't. And he just, can't. I'm saved. But without understanding the purpose, we lose sight of the vision. You think you just need to have a vision, but it says with lack of vision, they cast off restraint, cast off discipline. Look, I can look around, all the talents of people in here and all the giftings and everything that people do. There was a time that every one of you, it was hard, but you pressed through. I don't know anyone who's gone to medical school and went, this is easy. Not a problem. I love staying up 24 hours to study for a test. This is great. I love working all night, I love going back to college. I love going to nursing. No one, you really are sycophants if you loved everything that you went through. Like you might be a psychopath. You might have some issues. No one loves everything they go through. The Bible doesn't say give thanks for all the things you go through. It says give thanks in him, no matter what you're going through. That's why Paul and Silas were worshiping God in prison. They were giving God thanks, praise. They didn't like what they went through. They were like, let's do this again. I can't wait for tomorrow, some more beatings. It's not what they were doing, folks. That's just wrong. Paul was so mad the next day, they told him to go away quietly. He said, oh no, you beat a Roman without trial? They were like, uh-oh, we didn't know they were Romans. That's the problem. That's going to get us in trouble. Then they came pleaded with him, please, don't tell anyone. Like your government, don't tell anyone. Everyone has to set their eyes on him, but also there's a vision that's specific for all of us. Number one, there's a vision that's general to all of us, that we are conformed to his image. That's why trials and tribulations come. One, the devil wants to stop you. Just so you know that. The devil doesn't want you transformed in his image. He's terrified of the image of Christ. When you really realize who you are, the devil is terrified of that. Two, we're to do the works that he sent us to do. Now, some of those works are not ministry like mine. That's okay. I loved being an air traffic controller. I felt like an air traffic control. I knew I was in the will of God. Like when I got saved in what was it, 88, I didn't go, oh, I got to give this up. Like I knew God had put me in air traffic control, and I loved it. I actually loved doing it. And I don't know if I miss it. I love aviation. I don't think I miss, the schedule. But it was just something I really loved. I didn't hate my job. People were like, why are you leaving? You hate your job? I said, no, I actually love my job. I love what I do. But I also always saw my job, even in the Navy, as my job was to get the planes home safely. Now, that wasn't the mission of the ship, by the way. The mission of an aircraft carrier is to launch planes first, and if there's any to recover, you recover them. But the goal is to get them off the plane, off the deck, not, So that's number one priority. But my job, once I started talking to them, my whole job was to serve those pilots. That was my job, and that's the way I saw it. I'm there. I had an admiral coming in late one night. He wasn't supposed to fly at night. He hadn't flown at night in 3 years. Admirals don't get to fly a lot. And he's coming back, and it's dark now. And he hasn't done a night trap in 3 years. And he's coming in like at the island. Like, here's the ship, and he's coming at the island, and we waved him off. And the next one I came in, I put him on what's called a GCA talk time, which I'm going to give him direction all the way down. Here's my lieutenant. Don't embarrass him. What are you doing? Because by the way, I didn't ask permission to do that. As an air traffic controller, that's my ultimate authority, to do whatever I have to do to help that guy get down. No one can tell me not to do that around me. Okay, my job is to help that guy land. And I talked him all the way down. Here's my lieutenant. He's like, oh, he was so far, And all you saw was 2 legs. And let's put it that way. And he was just so afraid. And all of a sudden, I get a handwritten note from the admiral. Thank you very much. I haven't done a night trap in 3 years. I appreciate it. I get to go see my family next week. Thank you very much for talking me down. So here's one of your keys to success. You ready for it? Figure out what you're doing that is serviceable. How is it helping your fellow man? It'll bring value to what you're doing. Most everybody in here is doing something that has value. I wouldn't say, doing evil. That's not the value, right? Godly stuff always has value to the community. Always has value. Whether it's having a store, you have a grocery store. You're not just trying to make money, you're trying to bring food to people. I remember Randy saying this, why does the farmer grow food? Well, he wants to sell it. No, he grows food because he wants to feed people. That's why he does it. He just sees a value. Farmers are a different breed because they don't make a lot of money, but they love the fact that they grow something people can eat. I'm serious. Like they're a different, not the corporate farmers. I'm talking that family farm. They've been on it for 4 or 5 generations, and every fall it's like, okay, what do we have to plant next year? Okay, we got enough. Sometimes they have to take out a loan temporarily for the next year so they can get they're always living from, year to year kind of thing. You're hoping, you're praying. That's why a lot of them are Christians, because they're praying for the rain in season, right? For the weather to be right, because if it's not, they're in trouble. Even ministry, if you want to be in ministry for the wrong purpose, it's not going to be effective. There's people who want to be in ministry because they want to be in charge. And they're going to find out real quick you're not in charge as much as you think. I want to get in ministry because I want to be rich. Good luck. Yep, there's some people, they're really blessed. Usually not from ministry itself, but what they've done is they've served a lot more people. That's one of the keys. Is like if you only want to serve 10 people, then, well, some people want to grow a church because they just want more people, but that's not the reason. I do believe church growth is important. You want to bring people in the kingdom. If you have any value in what you're teaching, you want to reach more people with what you're teaching. If you don't want to reach more people with what you're teaching, then you haven't put the right value on what you're teaching. You can't keep secret if it's valuable. If what you have has value, then figure out how to reach more people with it. Why? Because God's not going to do it for you, because you're going to have to go through the pain of that. There's a lot of pain in that, by the way. You're going to have to do some things. You're going to have to learn some things. Wouldn't it be great if everyone just came and you just preached a message and went around the world? Doesn't happen. I remember someone saying, like Billy Graham's ministry was that big because God wanted it big. No, that's not why his ministry was that big, because he valued what he had. He started real small, but he put so much value on the salvation of souls that the ministry grew. Doesn't mean that he necessarily mechanismed it all, but there were those who came around who helped grow his ministry. There was someone who had to do the mailing list. Somebody had to arrange. He didn't arrange every event. You know what goes into arranging just arranging an arena event? You got a whole staff just to do that. But if you have no value in what you're teaching, then why would you ever advertise it? She's just stepped out on her own this last week. Amen. I gave them a word. When was it? 2010, 11? That they were called to the pastoral ministry. You know what? They took it to heart. The niece went back to school. She felt there was more value. The value in that would also be licensed, and so she could also help people on the secular, bring them over into the spiritual side. She's been doing that. She went through a lot of training, which is more like, I call it labor underpaid. And, training. And it's where they're not paying you for doing the job, but you're doing the job, but they call it training. Okay. But you have to do it, 2,000 hours. You have to do that before you can get licensed. Then you have to get tested. You have to do all that. If you look at what you're doing as a service instead of just an occupation, look at it as a service. When you learn the value of what you have, then people will pay for the value. If you don't know the value you have, then no one else has value. It's like these crazy things. They don't know what they want until we create it. That was like Steve Jobs' crazy statement. They don't know what they need until we create it. They might sound that's crazy. No, but he saw value. The reason was he hated all the smartphones. That was one thing that ticked him off. He just hated smartphones because they weren't that smart, he said. We had the Trio. We loved the Trio. That was awesome. And we got the iPhone, like that Trio. I never looked at the Trio again. I was like, this is like really a phone. Like you can actually do stuff. And that was before the app stores. I didn't know I needed it. He was right. Jerry had a BlackBerry. Oh, Jerry needed a new phone. BlackBerry. At least he didn't have a Windows phone. One of the 15 lucky people. I saw a video. I didn't watch it. It said, why the Windows phone didn't work? Well, because it was like all the other Windows products. They don't work. The point is that whether I was an air traffic controller, whether I was called to the ministry, I was called by God. I was just as much called when I was in air traffic control, even though the air traffic control was a process to what he ultimately had for me. But I could have very easily reduced myself down to just an air traffic controller because pursuing full-time ministry was too hard. And many people do stay more secular in that sense because God called them to be in ministry and they reduce it because the pain in the process is too difficult. And it is very difficult. You're going to need the grace of God. But I need the grace of God to be an air traffic controller. You know how I know that? Because when I left it, I could feel the grace leaving me to do it. I could feel that grace coming off me because it was time to leave. And if I stayed, I said, I'll probably crash 2 planes if I stay. I got to get out of here. I had a friend who was an air traffic controller, and 6 hour days, he was doing his business while he was at work. 6 hours a day, he's like on the computer doing other things. I said, it's time for you to leave. It's time for you to retire. You don't even want to be here anymore. And he talked about it with his family. He said, yeah, we decided you were right. Like, I don't want to be here. Well, why are you there? Well, because the pay's good. Yeah, but the pay will be fine when you leave. God will make it up. Find out what you're doing, and then find the value in it. And then my son is he's going to get a job. Yes. And no, he's been blessing. But he's looking at insurance agencies, right? If you just look at a way to make money and not that you're helping people prepare for the future, you taint it. And there are going to be people he's going to come across who are just in it for the money. They're just money. That's the wrong spirit. If it's just to make a lot of money, that's the wrong spirit. Because then you don't care who you crook. And this is why I'm not good at sales, because I'd be like, no, like, you don't need that car. Well, you want that car for, you can't afford, you got 7 kids and you want a 2-seater. What are you thinking about? You don't need a vet, you need a van. But I don't like the van. You need the van. Your wife's going to smack you, you get the van. By the way, though, you know what the payment is for that? I think I could squeeze it in if I give up this. Oh my God. I wouldn't be good. I'd be like, the guy would come in. They wanted a $70,000 car. You talked them into a $25,000 one. Well, that's all they could afford. You don't worry about what they could afford. Well, if you're really in the service side, you do. Because you care. You care about that person. You don't want them to make bad decisions because based on, I want a car, which is the worst thing to spend your money on. Anyways, because it really holds no value. Even if you get a Rolls Royce, it's not holding the value. My friend had a Rolls Royce. The wiper came off while he was going down the road. $350,000, there goes the wiper. Just came off the car. He said, no, but take off your shoes, fill the carpets. Oh, they're nice. That's $500,000 car. I had a Maxima. My friend had a Lexus. His car cost twice as much. He goes, heated seats, air-conditioned seats. He says, yours have that? I said, no, that was the $30,000 upgrade. He said, $30,000 upgrade? Yeah, I had to buy the Lexus to get that. I decided I didn't need a $30,000 upgrade, so I saved 30 grand on it. Put your hand on your heart. Let me pray over you. Father, refine our vision, refine our purpose, refine us, Lord, in you, that we would prosper in 2025 and be in health, even as our soul prospers. And we understand that the vision brings purpose to the pain. And no matter what we go through, you are going to work things out in 2025 and beyond. That we're going to look back on everything we go through and go, this is good, Father. You do all things well. Even though I couldn't see it on the other side. Now that I'm in the promised land, I understand the purpose. I thank you for it. In Jesus' mighty name, amen and amen.